Hello and welcome to this video, guys. Today we are going to solve some situational questions of medium to high level of difficulty from the topic Integration Management of the PMP exam. As you are aware, situational questions are one of the most difficult questions to tackle in the PMP exam, and about 50 to 60% of the total questions of the PMP exam are situational questions. So today we are going to learn how to solve these kind of questions super fast and super easy using the framework which we learned right in this video. So if you have not watched this video till now, go ahead and watch it and come back to this one. Hi, I am Ray and I'm a PMP certified project manager. The tips and strategies which I share in this channel are exactly the same ones which were used by me to pass my PMP exam on the first attempt. So if you are new to this channel, consider subscribing because I bring to you the most updated and relevant content of the PMP exam which will help you to pass the PMP exam in the first attempt. Okay, so grab a pen and a paper and let's jump right onto the first situational question from the topic Integration Management of the PMP exam. So this is the first question, guys. Pause the video and try to answer this question. Okay, so we will start to answer this question using the framework which we have defined. So step 1 is do not forget the positive bias principle, which states that we analyze every option word by word with a positive bias until we get a solid reason to reject it. Okay. Now with that in mind, we will move on to step 2, which is categorizing the question as per the same as a type 1 or a type 2 question. So let's read the question. It is stating that you are a project manager for an IT company and you have recently completed an application development for a client, but the client is still calling you and your team members to solve technical issues, and troubleshooting requests are coming as well as some change requests are also coming. And what should you do to ensure that this application project is now having ongoing operational support? So if you see the stem of this project from here to here, it is a type 1 question which talks about mostly what should you do as a project manager type. Okay. Now we have completed step 2. We have categorized the question as a type 1 question. Now we will move on to step 3, which talks about start eliminating options using the ideal project manager framework. Now when we read every option, we will read it with a positive bias and try to accept it rather than reject it, or we get a strong ground where we reject the option. Okay. So first is option A, obtain project acceptance from customer. Maybe this option can be eliminated because if you are a good project manager, you know that the customer will never give a project acceptance in this situation because there are still some small changes, etc., which are getting suggested. Okay. So whatever you may do, you will not get a project acceptance from the customer. So this option we can eliminate. Next is close the project, decommission the team and find a new project. Okay. Now, if you go back to the framework of ideal project manager, there is one principle which states that never bypass processes and documentation to accelerate delivery, right? But option B is going against it. It is stating that the project manager should close the project and decommission the team where the customer is yet not satisfied and there are some issues which are still going on. So option B is also not correct. We can safely eliminate it. Option C, keep supporting the customer as the application is still under development. Okay, this may be a possible option. We will hold this option. And option D is perform a project handover, which says that you hand over the project from the project department to the operations department. Okay, so we will hold this as well. So it is clear that the correct answer lies between option C or option D. Now let's go back to our step 3, which states that iterate the ideal project manager framework to identify the best option. Now if we look at option C, guys, very carefully, it is telling that keep supporting the customer as the application is still under development. Now if you read the question very carefully here, see this. It is saying in the very beginning that the application development is completed, but here it is saying that it is still under development. So mostly it's a wrong option. Okay. Now if you try to understand it from a project manager perspective, a project manager after the project closes always hands over the project to the customer or to the next department, and it also comes from the project manager behavior framework, where it states that a good project manager holds every department accountable for their tasks. Okay, so a good project manager, after doing the project, always hands it over to another entity, which may be the client, the customer, or the operations department. Now, it is not acceptable or not as per project management norms to keep on supporting the customer for eternity. That cannot happen, right? The project needs to be closed and the project manager needs to move on to other projects, right? So that is why option C is also wrong. And option D is the correct answer, which is perform a project handover. And by that, it means that you should perform a project handover to the operational department. Now you see here the strategy what we took here is we analyzed every option with a positive bias until and unless we found a very strong reason to reject it. So that's the learning, guys. Never reject an option until and unless you get a strong reason for it. Now let us move on to question number 2. Question number 2, guys. Pause the video, read the question carefully, word by word, and try to solve it. Okay, so we will start solving this question. As a step 1, we will keep the positive bias in mind, which states that we will analyze every option word by word with a positive mindset until we get a solid reason to reject it. Now with that, step 1, we move on to step 2 and try to categorize the question as a type 1 or a type 2 question. Now if you see the stem here, it states that what should you do as a project manager, right? So it is a type 1 question. So we will use the ideal project manager framework to solve this question. We will move on to step 3 and now start analyzing every option and retain it until and unless we find a strong reason to reject it. So option number A, tell the vendor to sort it out with the finance department and you take up a new project. Mostly this is a wrong option, guys, because if you go back to the ideal project manager framework, there is a behavior which states that a project manager owns up issues and solves inclusively rather than delegations and escalations. But essentially in this option, what you are doing is you are delegating it to the finance department and you are moving on to a new project. So you are not behaving inclusively as a project manager. So this option is wrong. Next option, close the project since you have already found out that the invoice was approved. It is the vendor's problem if they had a mistake in calculating tax. Again, if you consider this line, it states that you are behaving as a delegator or you are behaving not as an inclusive project manager. So that way you are just delegating it as a vendor's problem and you are just saying that, okay, it's a vendor's problem, the vendor should solve it, right? So that's not a correct project manager behavior. And you cannot close a project as well, guys, because the project is not yet closed because the vendor has still claims which is left. So if you talk in practical terms, you also can't close a project without settling all the claims of the vendor. Okay, so this option also goes. It's a wrong option. Let's discuss option number C. Ask support from the finance department to help the vendor resubmit a new invoice with correct tax structure and delay the project closure till the issue is resolved. This seems like a good option because it states the project manager to behave inclusively, taking into account the vendor as well as the finance department. We will park this option. Moving on to option D, onboard your sponsor about the situation and obtain his approval to close the project and move on to a new project. Again, it is going against the project manager principles. The first principle, which states that you have to own up issues and solve inclusively rather than going into escalations or every time going to your sponsor. So that way, this is also not a good option because it is stating that you have to close the project and move on to a new project without settling the claim. Okay. So that way, this option is also not correct because it falls against the project manager behavior. So that is why option number C is the correct option. We move on to question number 3. Pause the video, read the question and try to answer it. Okay, so we will start solving this question with step 1, which talks about the bedrock principle, which is we analyze every option word to word with a positive bias until we get a solid reason to reject it. Now with step 1 in mind, we will move on to step 2 and understand which type of question is it by reading the stem. So if you read the stem right here, it is asking what is the next step. So it is hinting at a sequence. So that way it is a type 2 question. Now next, we will move on to step 3 and identify which knowledge area or process group we are in. So in this, we say that it is stating we are in the execution stage and a new change request has come in. So mostly we are in the monitoring and controlling or the execution phase. Okay. Next, we move on to step 4 and try to see that which of the sequence which we have to recall to answer this question. Okay. Whether it's the sequence of table 4.1 of the PMBOK or the sequences of chain management or
ITTOs, etc., etc. Okay, which is our step 4. Now let us go and study the options one by one. Now obviously, since this is a question on change management, mostly the options will hint toward the sequence for the change management principle. Now you will see a card on the screen which takes you to the video where I have discussed how to memorize the full framework of change management principle, the flowchart of change management process, and you have to see that video, understand the full framework or the full flowchart, and then come back to this question to solve it. Else you will not be able to gain the full learning out of it. Okay. So go back, watch that video and come back to this question. Now, since you have watched that video and you know what is the flowchart which we are referring to, answering this question will now become very easy for you. Let's see. We will go through each of the options one by one. Okay. Option A is telling to ask your team to identify the impact of this change to budget and schedule. Okay. We will hold this option. It may be a right option. Second, take the change request to your sponsor and ask for his approval. Okay. Mostly this is a wrong option, guys. We can eliminate it right away, because if you have seen the integrated change control flowchart, you don't take a change request at the very beginning to the sponsor, and also it violates the ideal project manager behavior framework where you have to minimize escalations to your sponsor. So this option is outright wrong. Option C is document change request. Okay, this may be a good option. We'll park this. Option D, approve the request by yourself since you know that it will not impact budget or schedule. This option is also wrong, guys, because you never approve the change request by yourself since you know that it will not impact budget or something. It goes against the process, and also it goes against the project manager behavior framework, which states that the project manager has to be inclusive while driving projects. So option number D is ruled out. So we are left with option number C or option number A. Now we have to read these two options very carefully again. Option A is telling to ask your team to identify the impact of this change to budget and schedule. Okay. Here comes the beauty of the integrated change management flowchart. If you have seen the flowchart by now in that video, you would know that this option is a wrong option, because identifying the impact of a change comes later or in a change management process. First, you have to document the change when it comes. Okay. So if you see this question, it is saying that a change request has come, but it has never said that it has been documented yet. So going back to the ICC flowchart, you first have to document the change request, and then you have to link it with the charter or the scope. And if it satisfied the charter or the scope, then you go ahead and start the impact analysis on budget and schedule. Okay. So this sequence is very important, guys. You know this sequence, you will be able to answer this question. You don't know this sequence, you will mostly select option A, which will be of course the wrong option. So the answer to this question is option number C, which is document the change request. Question number 4, guys. Pause the video and try to answer this question. Okay, we will start solving it. So step number 1, the positive bias. We will analyze every option word by word until we get a solid reason to reject it. With that, we move on to step number 2 to identify the type of question. So this STEM refers to a type 2 because it is hinting at a sequence. So it is a type 2 question. Moving on to step 3, we have to identify which knowledge area or process group we are in. Now, if you read this question, we are in the developmental phase of a project and where one of your key stakeholders raises a concern. Okay. So mostly we are between the initiation and the planning process group. Okay. So that is why mostly your charter is not yet closed, or maybe your charter is in a iteration with your stakeholders. Okay. So maybe we are in planning as well. Okay. So step number 4, now we try to recall which of the sequences this question is referring to. Now, is it the table 4.1 or the change management flowchart or the ITTOs? Okay. Now, as we see here, it refers to none of those sequences. So we will move on to step 5, which is we will start going through the options and trying to eliminate it with the positive bias mindset. So option number A, business case. Okay. Maybe this is a correct option. We will hold this. You can revisit the business case. We will come back to it later. Risk register. Okay. This is a wrong option, guys. Why? Because at this point of time, your risk register is mostly not prepared. Okay. Since you are in the planning phase yet, your charter is not yet signed off totally, or your stakeholders are not yet fully aligned with the charter. So mostly your risk register is not made right here, or even if it is made, the input to risk register will come at a later stage. Okay. Now, since it is asking what should you review first as a project manager, you first try to review a document which resolves this anomaly, okay, between you and the stakeholder. So risk register is a wrong option. Option number C, you review the project charter. Okay, maybe yes, you can hold this option. Project charter states a lot of assumptions and a lot of policies of the project. We can hold this. Option number D, statement of work. Okay, this is also again a wrong option because mostly the statement of work is developed during the procurement phase. Okay, so this question talks mainly about the initiation of the planning phase. It has not gone into the procurement or the execution phase as well. Okay, so statement of work is an outright wrong option. So we are left with option number A or option number C. Here comes the important point. You need to understand what a business case is about and what a project charter is about. So if you go to PMBOK and read what is project business case, you will see that it is a documented economic feasibility study. It only states whether economically the project is feasible or not. It does not state any policy or any guidelines or any governance points or any assumptions. Okay. So you need to be very clear what the project business case states. Now, if you read this definition, it becomes very clear to you that a business case is the wrong option for this question. Okay. Now let's go back to the question. Business case is the wrong option. So the correct option is option C, which is project charter. So if you read the definition of project charter, so it always states the assumptions of the project, the guidelines of the project, the governance of the project and everything. So since it is a PII issue and it's a governance issue, so mostly you should review the project charter first as a project manager. So C is the correct option. We move on to question number 5. This is a good one. Read it very carefully, pause the video and try to answer it. Okay, we will start solving it with the same bedrock principle as step 1, which state that we will analyze every option with a positive bias until we get a strong reason to reject it. Moving on to step number 2, we read the question stem, which states that what should the project manager do first? So it is a type 2 question. Okay. We move on to step 3, which is to identify which knowledge area or process group we are in this question. Now, if you read the question, the project manager is preparing a charter. Okay, so we are mostly in the initiation stage of the project because charter is made in the initiation stage. So with that identified, we move on to step 4 and try to understand whether we have to recall any of the specific sequences from table number 4.1 or the change management process flowchart or the ITTOs. Okay, but if you read this question, it does not hint to any of those sequences. So we will move on to step 5, where we will start studying those options and start eliminating it on solid grounds. Option 1, go to the sponsor and ask him for a rationale for this automation project. Okay, now this line, I don't like this part of the option. Okay, go to the sponsor. Again, it is an escalation. It is against the project manager behavior of a matured and a good project manager. So this option is a wrong option. Okay, you don't go to the sponsor right away. You need to learn how to solve issues yourself. Option B, update the risk register stating that the project will be delayed due to non-cooperation of the ops manager. Again, it is stating that you are a very reactive project manager and you are not being inclusive, and right away you are saying that the project will get delayed without even trying to resolve this issue. So option B is also eliminated. Option C, provide objective cost benefit analysis evidence of the automation project to the ops manager. Okay, we will hold this for now. Let's see. Option D, set up a meeting with the department manager to explain the business case and the benefits management plan. Okay, this is a good option. This can also be true. Fine. So we are left with option C and option D. So now we go ahead and iterate and try to eliminate any one of the options on solid grounds. Now, if you see option C, guys, it is stating that providing objective cost benefit analysis to the ops manager. Now, this will not help, guys, because here the issue is more on the alignment of the strategic part of the project. So there is automation which is going on, and of course it's a very relatable project in my industry as well. So whenever automation project goes on, there is always a risk of layoffs, people thinking that their jobs might get lost. So you have to understand the emotional psyche of the operations manager behind this issue. Okay, so just showing him a mathematical chart or a financial Excel sheet about the cost benefit analysis will not help. Okay, you will not be able to gain the strategic alignment of the operations manager. So option C is wrong. Now, why option D is more correct? Because if you read the definitions of the business case and the benefits management plan in the PMBOK, just go ahead and read it. You will see that the benefit management plan talks specifically about the strategic alignments of the stakeholders for a project. Okay, so that is why option D is a very strong option and it is the correct option for the question.
I hope today's video was helpful. At least you got a decent amount of understanding about how to approach a situational question. Because to solve a situational question, your strategy is more important than your knowledge. And if you have liked the video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And let me know in the comment section down below whether you are enjoying this PMP question and answer series. Let me know if you want me to keep on making videos like this, okay? So thank you for watching today's video and I'll see you again soon with another topic of the PMP exam in this channel. Bye-bye.